because it is, it is something I take into account. That is part of service excellence when somebody says to me, yeah, I'm helping you reduce your footprint.
Let's partner up for good with NESCAFÉ.
NESCAFÉ, supporting your business journey. This topic is all about sustainability. It's a hot topic, it's not going to go away, and today we're going to be talking about business challenges around the issue of sustainability. Now, you may have noticed I'm joined by Deborah Meaden, entrepreneur, investor, and obviously known to us all from Dragon's Den. Now, I know, Deborah, that sustainability is very close to your heart.
It is indeed, but actually it's a language that business has always spoken. You don't make decisions today that are going to break your business tomorrow. You don't make decisions today. We shouldn't be making decisions today that break our planet tomorrow. So actually, we have been speaking this language. We just need to apply it to the business that we're doing.
Now, I said we were joined by one of our NESCAFÉ experts. Robin, tell us a little bit about what you do for the company.
Yeah, hi, I'm Robin Sundaram. For a number of years, I've been leading our responsible sourcing program. So working with our suppliers all the way back to farmers on how can we improve both our environmental and our social footprint. Currently, I lead our community work in particular as Nestlé. Just going back to your point, Deborah, companies have been doing this for a long time. We've been around for 158 years as a company. And you don't do that if you're thinking short term. So those long-term decisions that really impacts both the social and the environmental aspects are key, and companies have been doing that for a long time.
Robin, tell us about some of the sustainability initiatives at NESCAFÉ.
So yes, we've implemented what we call the NESCAFÉ 2030 plan. And what that's about really is how can we support all of our coffee farmers around the world to become more resilient to climate change, but at the same time still be able to make a good living as well. So there are a number of things that we're doing within that program. So we're supporting them through what we call regenerative agriculture. So how can they improve the quality of their soils? So we're giving them technical advice. We give them free sort of plantlets that are disease resistant as well, because there's a disease called rust that impacts the coffee trees. We also just give them advice in terms of how they can get more yield from how they plant. So that means that they can be more productive as farmers and therefore get a greater income. So those are some of the initiatives that we're supporting. We're also, in terms of their own sort of financial well-being, we do things like we're looking into helping them to get insurance against weather problems. Access to finance is sometimes hard, so how can we get help with access to finance? So those kinds of initiatives we're pulling together, and that's a program that we've got going right across the world in many of our coffee markets. So yes, that's what NESCAFÉ 2030 is all about, and it's already started really well, and we know that it's going to achieve, hopefully, a lot of things by the time we get to 2030.
And those farmers and the communities that they serve, they must be really grateful for that support.
Yeah, exactly. They're really grateful because they know that we're in it for the long term. And the NESCAFÉ plan actually started about 12, 15 years ago. So we've already been on the journey. But 2030 is about really kicking in terms of particularly that resilience to climate change piece, because we're living it, they're living through it right now.
Taking people on the journey is something that's cut through all of this. And I know that you want to take your clients on a journey. What specifically do you want to know about?
In the current range, we have an eco-friendly toothbrush, a sensitive toothpaste, and a whitening toothpaste. We've gone down the road of a bamboo-based toothbrush. And in terms of our toothpaste, it's vegan, it's SLS-free. We have a low water content, so we're reducing any water wastage, as well as reducing any harsh chemicals. So in terms of the formulation, we've got that right. But the question that I have for you, Deborah, is how do I source sustainable packaging? How can I improve it?
Oh gosh, that is, you must get that. You must spend your life doing this, don't you? I actually might speak really quickly and then hand you over, because this is absolutely his topic. But first thing I would say, you need to understand the bits of that you've absolutely got right and the bits that you haven't. And actually, you need to also look at things like a bamboo toothbrush. That might not necessarily be the right thing. Plastic gets a terrible, terrible reputation. It is an amazing product. What we do is we use it badly. I suspect that in your toothbrush, you've got plastic bristles.
Yes, we do, yeah.
So it's very hard to recycle a two product, those two products together. It makes it much more difficult. So sometimes it's actually better to say, I'm going to make it all of the same product, and that way it's really, really easy to recycle. So I think deep understanding of the ethics and the sustainability of the actual product that you're making. I sense that you've got the formula. You're dentists. I suspect you've got the formulations right, but things like that you probably never thought about. Why would you? It's a very specialist bit of knowledge. In terms of the packaging, again, the first thing I always think is try and design as much packaging out as you possibly can. Try to make it of a single substance so that you haven't got mixed product. Think about things like the ink. Everybody thinks about what's it made of in terms of the card. They never think about the ink. They never think, well, actually, if I put foil on it, does that make it more difficult? So really stop and think about every single step along the way. But I suspect you're actually going to get much better advice from Robin. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you. Well, actually, yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, they're really, really important things. I think the packaging in general, and yeah, in terms of like plastics, as we said, plastics aren't the villain of the piece, and it's being able to do. So I would suggest doing a bit of research. Have you looked at WRAP? Have you heard of WRAP as an organisation? They've got some fantastic online things that you can look at, and there's Pledge to Recycle is another great area that you could look at. So just doing you kind of a sort of broader research. The second thing I'd say is, what about also your secondary packaging? So the cardboard that it comes in, the boxes, is that recyclable? Do you send out leaflets with all your products that go out?
We do have a small introduction presentation that we
because you know those leaflets that you send out, are they recycled paper? So it's looking at all packaging, including secondary, and then it also relates to what you could do as well in terms to help to drive consumer behavioural change as well. So if you're sending leaflets out, can you put suggestions in there like turning off your tap when you're brushing your teeth?
So our next question was, how can we improve the sustainability practices in general with our business? So for example, at the moment, we make our toothpaste in the UK. The tubes are sourced abroad. So how can we improve that while also taking into account the costs? Obviously, we've just started our business. We are just a startup.
The truth is that in business, there are a lot. It's never pure. There are a lot of conflicting decisions. And actually, it's also true, isn't it, that net zero can sometimes conflict with nature, can conflict with ethics. It's never straightforward. So what you need to do is come up with your hierarchy. These are the things that we really, really care about, and it'll help you filter your decisions through those, and you will reach points where you think, actually, which is of those is more important? And I say that because actually getting things made abroad is not always a terrible thing. It might be helping economies that are struggling. It might be more environmentally friendly to have it made abroad. If you think about it, and the raw material is sitting over there, you've got to ship the raw material anyway. Maybe it's okay to get it made abroad. So I wouldn't be too pure. I wouldn't just filter things out because of kind of the things we're used to hearing. It's better to make in the UK. Of course, it's great to make in the UK. But if you have your hierarchy of things that matter to you, you might find that actually making it ethically that might help another society, making it in a more sustainable way because the raw materials are over there, that might lead you to that decision. And once you've got that hierarchy, then you can voice it. Once you know what's important and you tell your customer that's what we consider important, you're going to attract people with the same values, and you're not going to disappoint them because you've told them. And it's deeply within you. So you're going to get real trust, and you're not going to attract the ones who don't care about the same things as you. That's life. But if once you know what that is, you can act it and you can voice it.
Robin, I imagine Nestlé source from all over the world. Do you have the same dilemmas?
Yeah, constantly. And it's exactly that, because it's all shades of grey. There's nothing is black and white here. And a decision that you make which feels right or because that's what everyone's talking about can have unintended consequences. And we have to constantly look at exactly where does it all fit. Yeah, human rights challenges, it might be deforestation, and you have to balance it out. So so yes, we're constantly having to think about that. I think to Deborah's point really is that you can really just focus on what can you actually do, what are the small things, and small things can build up. So I know right at the beginning we talked about deliveries, logistics, but you're delivering things every day. So the company that you've chosen, are they using electric vehicles, for instance? Well, that potentially might, depending on that hierarchy that Deborah spoke about, that that could be something that you look at. But I think as long as all of these small changes that you make and you decide what they are, they do all add up. And I had I don't know, you've probably heard this saying before, but one of my favourite sayings is that if you think you're too small to make a difference, say that to the mosquito in your room in the middle of the night. Yeah.
Do you know what? It's so true because, I'm going to pick on something you said there. Just asking your suppliers what they're doing can change their behaviour. It can absolutely be the spark that says, and it's what you're doing. It's if somebody asked you, I know you. I've only known you for not very long, but I know if somebody asked you a question, you'd be thinking, we need to get onto that, and it's amazing how if you ask the question, and once you know what it is that matters to you and you ask the question, you'll drive change beyond your business. And that gets really exciting when you think, I'm actually, you can, enough people do it. If one person does it, maybe not much difference. 1,000,001 people does it, changes the world.
Kim, what's the big challenge facing you and your business?
I think the biggest challenge for us is trying to find a solution to our van and vehicle usage with regards to, we use diesel vans. We've got over 50 of them and they're up and down the country, and it just grinds me that they're bursting out all these horrible fumes and everything, and I can't find a solution that's cost effective and won't affect our service.
Obviously, and I suspect you're all over this, but the first thing is, of course, job planning. Because the best thing we can all do is actually design our carbon emissions out of the work. So the least amount of miles that you can possibly do, that is absolutely the first place to start. The second thing is something that I learnt when I was doing my podcast, The Big Green Money Show. And it was that I actually have a Porsche, a petrol Porsche. You'd think, oh my goodness, how can you talk about being environmentally friendly? I only do 2,000 miles a year. I was told by no less person than Mike Berners-Lee, who's written the book on the carbon emissions of everything, that it's actually okay to keep a vehicle if you do reasonably low mileage, under 2,000-3,000 miles a year. It's actually better to keep the vehicle because of the emissions that are embedded in the making of a new vehicle. I suspect yours are probably doing more than that, aren't they?
They are, yes, but we don't keep our vans for any longer than 3 years. We have telematics in all of the vans, and we have dash cams as well. So every morning, all the engineers have to do vehicle checks, which will help keep our maintenance costs down. But yeah.
Okay, so then your next option is, what do you go for when you replace those vehicles? Now, the bad news is that our infrastructure around EVs has not been good enough. So range anxiety is the single biggest barrier to people moving into EVs. It is changing, and it's changing quite rapidly. So we now have seen the first purely charging, no petrol at all, just charging stations. First one sprung up in Ipswich. It changed overnight the amount of vehicles that were EVs that were owned in Ipswich. So that has demonstrated to people this is a real market. I might be saying to you, hold on for a bit. I think in the next 6 months even, it's going to be clearer where the charging points are. Are you using the apps that show you where the petrol stations are?
Yes, we do.
And which ones are live and which ones are working? Because that's the other way. It just helps plan the journey and it makes people feel a lot more confident. And you say that you're not looking at in-home charging. Why not?
It's very difficult with the engineers where they actually, some of them live in tower blocks, some of them live at their parents' house, and it just would. I feel that it would cause issues for us.
It would be divisive because some could deal with it and others couldn't deal with it. Okay, well that is a very good reason to make sure it's one for all, really, as opposed to being divisive. Yeah, so I think that's the thing. It might be, honestly, and I don't want to say it because I want to rush us into sustainability, but it might be that it develop, and it is developing quite fast, that over the next 6 months it'll be clearer to you. You will reach a point where you think, actually, this is okay now. There are charging points all over the country.
I think that's pretty much spot on. The infrastructure, electric, and you've already started, the infrastructure has been really slow to build, but it's getting there. So, yeah, maybe it's a case of waiting. There are other options you can explore, and I don't know how right they are for you. So, for instance, we've got vehicles that have LNG, so liquid natural gas. So I don't know whether that is something that you could do. There's also, we just started to trial HVO, which is hydrogenated vegetable oil. But again, it's a diesel, but it's a more renewable diesel, which apparently up to 90% reduction in greenhouse gases.
We want to try and reduce our carbon footprint as much as we possibly can. But how can we do that without damaging our service excellence, which is what we really pride ourselves on as a business? So how can we, we want to continue reducing, but how do we find that happy balance?
So I think the language that you use to make sure that people understand this is better, this is my better. We talked about what's your better, defining your better. And if you can say our better is that we are really, really good service and we really, really care about the planet, then people will start seeing your service from a slightly different viewpoint, and they will take that into account. So I think shouting about it, making sure your language talks about it in a very positive way. You're part of the solution. You're helping them be part of the solution. And I don't think it will be a problem at all, because it is something I take into account. That is part of service excellence when somebody says to me, yeah, I'm helping you reduce your footprint. So I think just be really clear that is part of what you're offering, and that's what makes you different to other organisations.
We say, don't we, sustainability is a journey. And that's what it is. It's not you don't tick the box.
I would go a step further. I'd say it's about state of mind. It's about how it should literally be. It's just part of how we live, and it isn't something you specifically try to achieve. So I sometimes also think the word sustainability itself puts people off. So in terms of the language that you use, you are doing some really great things. And let's not forget the social. We were talking earlier before we came. You're doing fantastic things in terms of your local community, helping out older people at Christmas, and there's lots of other things. That's all part of your story, which you can really bring alive. And older people at Christmas, and there's lots of other things. That's all part of your story, which you can really bring alive. And I actually think also, again, just based on some of the conversations we had earlier, you have a potential to, because on the social side, it's about community, ultimately, and you work within the local community, and you're doing great things. So how can you work with other businesses in the community to really scale your impact as well, which ultimately is doing the right thing, and I know you're personally passionate about. So how does it all come together to tell the story that it isn't? Yes, carbon footprint is important, but that's only part of the story.
Thanks to our experts for sharing their insights and their advice. If you'd like further tips on sustainability, then visit nestleprofessional.co.uk.